has partnered with My Catholic Will, the only online Catholic will writing tool. Our partnership allows you to secure your legacy of faith and give hope to future generations of Catholics. Using My Catholic Will to plan your legacy is simple and stress-free. In as little as 15 minutes, you can write your will. And the best part is that it's completely free to use. Visit thestationofthecross.com to start your will today. And please consider a legacy gift to the Station of the Cross. Your faith and values will be passed on to future generations. May God bless you and your family.
This August, for the first time ever, 7 renowned Catholic speakers all under one roof. Your Catholic Media Network, celebrating 25 years of bringing you the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
Hey everybody, it's Raymond Arroyo. I want to invite you to a very special event. On August 24th, I'm going to be at the Niagara Falls Convention Center celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Station of the Cross. I hope you'll come out. I'm speaking with a slew of other incredible speakers. We'll meet in person. I'll sign your books. It's going to be a great day. Go to thestationofthecross.com. Thestationofthecross.com for tickets and all the details. And I hope to see you then. Bye now.
For more information and to purchase your tickets now, visit thestationofthecross.com.
When you talk to people who are locked in sin, and you can't convince them to leave their sin, it's because they don't have any fear of hell. They fear God, they don't want to offend Him, but nobody talks about the fact that hell's real or that it endures forever. So you stand before the truth of God and you're illuminated completely in His truth. All you see is all the filthiness, the wretchedness, how vile you are, and how you hate Him. You hate the one that you stand in front of. So what if He tries to give you a hug? You hate Him. You won't accept it. What if He says, please come in? I hate you. I would never come in there. This is how horrible it is. This is what has to be meditated on. To die in a state of sin means that you hate God. Whether you feel like you hate God or you don't, it doesn't matter. Not having the grace of God means you hate Him.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Ask a Priest Live, weekdays at 6 p.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross. We'll bring you a different priest each weekday where you can participate in a live Q&A on the topics that matter. To get your question in for Father, call 1-877-511-5483 while the show is live. Email us anytime at priests@thestationofthecross.com or visit our show page at thestationofthecross.com/askapriest.
Where does that leave us lay faithful? Is there anybody still in charge over there?
We simply have to resist it, say, I'm sorry, Holy Father, I respect you, but my respect also includes affirming you in the truth by saying what you're doing is wrong. We like solutions and problems to go away, but there's no easy solution available to say, okay, the Pope is saying bad things, he's no longer the Pope. No, it doesn't work that way.
That's A Catholic Take, weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Hear a powerful sermon you need to share with a loved one? Maybe there's a guest, prayer, or teaching segment that deserves another listen. You can listen to any of our network-produced programs at your convenience by finding us wherever you enjoy podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and the free iCatholic radio app. Be uplifted in your faith. Listen today at thestationofthecross.com or on your favorite podcasting platform.
This is Joe McLean, and you're listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of the truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McClain starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's great to be on with you. Hey, big news over the weekend. The Vatican has finally come out and made a statement against the atrocities, the blasphemies, the sacrilege of the opening ceremony at the Olympics in Paris. I mean, kind of a day late and a dollar short. It was like over a week ago now. And it seems to be a wee bit weak sauce. But what we're really learning is it wouldn't have happened at all if it wasn't for the guy who runs Turkey. You know, what is the remnant of the Ottoman Empire. He had to call the Pope to get him to make any statement whatsoever. Really? Like, what's up with that? We're going to have that conversation today with Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition at 30 past the hour. Do join us if you can. I find like that's really crazy. Like, it takes the Muslim fella from Turkey to get you, Erdogan. He has to call you to get you to make this statement. Okay. All right. Interesting. We're also going to have Sam McCarthy on the team from the Washington Stand. He's got a long article over there on the French Revolution, the root of all evil. We'll be talking to Sam at 14 past the hour. Some interesting insights, to say the least. We'll be linking to both of these stories today for you at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But we also are just learning this morning that His Holiness Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Cardinal Sean O'Malley out of Boston and has appointed his replacement already. Bishop Richard Henning will succeed O'Malley in the Archdiocese of Boston. That's breaking news this morning. So we'll be sharing all of this with you again with the show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We have a lot to get to today, and it's going to be a jam-packed week. I've got another whistleblower from this time from the Department of Homeland Security on the team tomorrow. David Torkington is back. Dr. Mary Cuff is back this week, and a lot more. You're going to want to stick around. Do share us with a friend. We'd be grateful to you. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come. Before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Our Lady of the Snow, pray for us. Today's feast celebrates the dedication of the famous Roman Basilica of St. Mary Major, which was built under Pope Liberius in the 4th century. A popular Roman tradition tells that a miraculous snowfall occurred on this date, during the height of summer, to mark the spot where Our Lady desired the basilica to be constructed. On the same day, she appeared to a wealthy Roman noble couple and inspired them to donate the land for the basilica. The Blessed Virgin continues to be venerated under the title Our Lady of the Snow, and every year on this feast day, snow-white jasmine petals drift down from the ceiling of the basilica to commemorate the name. The basilica is also home to the crib of our Lord, brought thence from Bethlehem, and to the famous image of Our Lady as Salus Populi Romani, or the salvation of the Roman people. Countless miracles have been worked through invoking Our Lady's aid under this title and image. The only other churches whose dedications are celebrated by the entire church are the Lateran Basilica, or the Archbasilica of the Most Holy Savior, on November 9th, and the basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul outside the walls, together on November 18th. For more about this day and others in the church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons. Our Lady of the Snow, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Ground News reports man charged for making terroristic threats at Arrowhead concert. A man was arrested at the Morgan Wallen concert for making a terroristic threat to shoot 2 Kansas City Chief members, delaying the concert by over 40 minutes. Aaron Brown of Winchester, Illinois, faces a Class E felony of making a terroristic threat in the 2nd degree, according to the Jackson County prosecutor. Brown threatened the players on social media while the Kansas City Fusion Center monitored threats during the event at Arrowhead Stadium. La Figaro is reporting 7 EU countries call on Venezuela to release electoral rolls from disputed presidential vote. 7 European Union countries, including Italy, France, Germany, and Spain, called on Venezuelan authorities to publish electoral rolls for transparency after last week's election, as stated by the Italian Prime Minister's office. The joint statement reflects growing international criticism regarding the Venezuelan government's handling of the election, as the guard has been sent out to squash the populist uprising. The New York Post is reporting Olympic boxer Lin Yu-ting secures medal amid gender eligibility row. Boxer Lin Yu-ting of Taiwan, who claims to be a female, won his first Olympic medal at the Paris Games following fellow trans boxer Khalif of Algeria amid scrutiny regarding their gender eligibility. Lin and Khalif faced controversy over disqualification from last year's World Championships due to alleged failure of eligibility tests by the International Boxing Association. IOC President Thomas Bach stated, quote, "There was never any doubt about the women's right to compete," condemning hate speech directed at them. Let's just be clear. They're both males, biological males, who just beat up a bunch of biological females in female sports. Let that sink in. Those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21. When Jesus heard of the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. The crowds heard of this and followed him on foot from their towns. When he disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, and he cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples approached him and said, "This is a deserted place, and it is already late. Dismiss the crowd so that they can go to the villages and buy some food for themselves." He said to them, "There is no need for them to go away. Give them some food yourselves." But they said to him, "5 loaves and 2 fish are all we have." Then he said, "Bring them here to me." And he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples, who in turn gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up the fragments left over, 12 wicker baskets full. Those who ate were about 5,000 men, not counting women and children. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Haydock's commentary would say, he did not retire through fear, as some may think. Hence, the evangelist does not say he fled, but he retired, to show us that he did not fear his enemies. Jesus Christ does not always anticipate the intentions of his supplicants. On this occasion, he waited for the multitude to ask of him to feed them, but they, through their great respect for him, did not dare to request the favor, says St. Chrysostom. This happened when the Passover was near at hand, being the 3rd since the commencement of our Savior's ministry. St. John does not usually relate what is mentioned by the other evangelists, especially what happened in Galilee. If he does it on this occasion, it is in order to introduce the subject of the heavenly bread. And therein lies the greatest key to this passage, as well as the other event that's similar to this. But this one is held for the Jews. The other one was held for the Gentiles, by the way. The Ignatius Catholic Study Bible would say Jesus' multiplication of loaves appears in every gospel. The event anticipates the Eucharist, a point that Matthew reinforces by using the same series of verbs: taking, blessed, broke, gave. Here and as well as at the Last Supper. The miracle also recalls the similar Old Testament episodes in 2 Kings, where the prophet Elisha multiplied 20 barley loaves to feed 100 men with some left over. Morally, according to St. John, Patriarch of Alexandria and Theophilacate, the 5 loaves signify alms given to the poor. as here the size of the donation is less significant than the generosity of one's heart. Gifts given to the poor are in return multiplied by God back to the giver, a treasure in heaven. Going back to Haydock's commentary, he says, it cannot be said, as some pretend, that other loaves were invisibly put into the apostles' hands, since it is said that they filled 12 wicker baskets full of fragments of the 5 barley loaves. And again, he divided them 2 fishes among them all. So I have personally, I'm sure you might have as well, heard some priest at some point preach that this was an episode of sharing, that everybody pulled from their coats the bread and the fish that they had stored up inside of their garments, and they just simply shared with the crowd. That is nonsense. It is not true. It is fake history. It is revisionist history, and you shouldn't believe it. Don't ever believe it. It's not true. They have struggles with the divinity of Christ. They have struggles with miracles. And just because they struggle doesn't mean we're going to tolerate that. We don't. The Lord God gave his only begotten Son, who took upon flesh and dwelt among us. He is either God or he is not. And if he is God, let the chips fall where they may. Your entire life needs to be oriented around that fact, that reality. Stop running from it. Embrace it. It is what it is. God took loaves and fish and multiplied it, and he distributes the Holy Eucharist, which this symbolizes and foreshadows, through his disciples. That is how we approach the supper of the Lord. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
The Station of the Cross began broadcasting in Buffalo, New York in 1999. Since then, our listening areas have multiplied and expanded into several states. While our mission is to grow the Catholic faith through radio and other media outlets, our apostolate is supportive of but independent from your local diocese. Through your generosity, we are able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments. Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
I grew up Catholic Church, haven't been in the Catholic Church for decades, but I'm in the process of working my way back for the simple reason that I needed a place to listen to pro-life, pro-family messages. Catholic radio is it. It's a place to hear that message without all the political bias and all that's going on News Talk Radio.
It changed my life.
It's the only station I turn on.
The Catholic station is an answer to prayer.
It couldn't be more fulfilling.
It's helped me learn more about the faith, and it's helped me to deepen my faith as a result of that.
It's on continuously in my house, day and night. You can't imagine how much I receive from that channel.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
We hear all the time from listeners who discover the station by seeing a Try God bumper magnet in traffic. You can request a free bumper magnet and start evangelizing just by driving around town. Go to thestationofthecross.com and click on promotional material under the About tab. There you can request a magnet for your listening area. We even have one for the iCatholic Radio mobile app. Request yours today.
Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, I don't understand it any more than you do, but the Vatican has apparently come out with a statement. I mean, I guess it's good, right? Like it didn't say anything for like 8 days. Silence was deafening. But nonetheless, it took a phone call from the guy who runs Turkey, the Muslim fella, Erdogan. Like, he's the one who encouraged Pope Francis to make a statement. Kind of weird, don't you think? We're going to have that conversation with Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition coming up at 30 past the hour. So join us for that if you can. We spent a lot of time last week talking about what was going on in the Olympics, the opening ceremony, the controversy over the transgendered male boxers who beat up a bunch of female athletes. And I guess we're happy about it nonetheless. The whole world seems to be okay with that. Bizarre world we live in, isn't it? We did touch on a couple of times last week on the French Revolution, which seems to be alive and well in France today. Well, Sam McCarthy has come out with a really detailed article over at the Washington Stand. We're going to be linking to this, but WashingtonStand.com is the website. We'll put a link to the exact article in our show notes today over at the stationofthecross.com/ACT. Sam joins us now. Sam, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Joe, thanks very much for having me on. It's really good to be talking with you again.
The French Revolution, this is a very interesting concept because I think it's an opportunity for us to sort of remind ourselves what started the French Revolution, what was the French Revolution really about at its heart. I mean, this is something that predates Marxism and has its tentacles in what we would see today as National Socialism, fascism, communism, and then of course the whole trans movement that we're seeing today. Give us the long and the short of that from your article.
Yeah, so I think really what it kind of boils down to in the end is at its core, the French Revolution was opposed to authority. Now, initially in purely political terms, this was opposed to the authority of the king. The certain members of the French public felt that the king had maybe neglected them, perhaps abused or taken advantage of them, which, some kings certainly had. No human authority, no king is going to be perfect. No president, no anybody, human authority is going to be perfect. No, even we know as Catholics, no pope is going to be perfect. So no human authority is going to be entirely perfect. They felt that the king had abused or neglected them, and that was kind of at least the political impetus for this movement, which quickly became even more radical and determined that in order to get rid of authority, not just the king, but all authority, the chief of all authorities had to be destroyed, which was God, as represented in the church. And the Catholic Church was hugely influential in France, certainly at the time and throughout, history prior to that point. So they targeted the church, the Catholic Church, priests, bishops, nuns, executed wantonly. The Christian calendar rewritten, really just the authority of God questioned, and somebody else, the Jacobins, they were called, who were kind of the most radical wing, I should say, of the French Revolution, trying to usurp the role of God.
One of the things you said in your article that caught my attention was prostitution had been long outlawed but flourished in the dark and hidden places. And although the king's grandfather, Louis XIV, had outlawed pornography, Louis XVI found it increasingly difficult to halt the production, distribution, and consumption of the smut that burgeoning newspapers and magazines printed, particularly as the demand for pornography increased. Gambling, too, had become a common pastime among all the classes of the French. That stood out to me because it seems like this past week we have seen quite a bit of this idea that Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, these were bad people. They were full of themselves. Then they were living this lavish, rich lifestyle. They were living debauched lifestyles. The rumor mill has spread. But you seem to indicate that there's another side to that story that may not be as well known.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I think history has been, not history as a subject, but kind of popular perception of history has been unkind to Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who were both decent people. I won't say that they were necessarily paragons of virtue. They weren't necessarily among the greatest of rulers. Marie Antoinette was, very shy, somewhat, I won't say self-obsessed either, but somewhat kind of self-concerned, very interested in making a good impression on people. Her husband, the king, was very indecisive. He relied very heavily. He would have been much better off as a monk or a scholar. He relied very heavily on the opinions and the thoughts of others. And so popular perception of history has treated them somewhat unfairly. Part of that is also predicated on the fact that there were propaganda campaigns against them. That mention of pornography extended to political pornography. For years, because of an illness that the king suffered, he and Marie Antoinette were unable to conceive. They were not able to have a child for the first several years of their marriage. And newspapers attributed that to various degeneracies. They would say that Marie Antoinette was involved in bestiality or necrophilia or pedophilia. At her trial, she was accused of sexually abusing her own 9-year-old son, who, when he was found dead several years later, the doctor performing the autopsy was appalled by the scars that the French revolutionaries had left on this child's back.
Wow.
So just these appalling lies that were centered around these two. Because of course, you can see the same thing today, sort of in today's political sphere, with the attribution of Donald Trump as Hitler. He's literally Hitler. He's obviously not literally Hitler. They're going to keep saying that he's literally Hitler. It's the only way to take down political opponents in the popular perception, especially those who maybe aren't terribly unpopular or aren't as unpopular enough to start some kind of revolt or revolution. That's really the only way to target them, is through that propaganda. They were both good Catholics. Marie Antoinette, her last words were, my God, have mercy upon me." And she considered the French people to be her own children. She begged that God would have mercy on her children, the French people. She was Austrian born, but she adopted the French people who killed her as her own. So these were both people who were decent people. They were what we think of as just normal people, basically. But this propaganda campaign attributed all kinds of debauchery and degeneracy and selfishness to them. That's where you get the ideas of the lavish stuff. Marie Antoinette's famous line, the "let them eat cake," as the French revolutionaries are storming the Palace of Versailles. She never said that. Every single historian agrees. She never, ever said that, and never would have. Instead, she ran to her husband's room because they were calling for Marie Antoinette to be beheaded right then and there.
Wow. In the article, you say the spirit of the French Revolution lives on today. In some sense, all revolutions since then have taken the French Revolution as their inspiration and forebear. The bloody Bolshevik Revolution, Adolf Hitler's ascension to dictatorship, the countless communist revolutions of the 20th century are all the progeny of the French Revolution. The French Revolution, you go on to say, instead propounded the glory of the negative liberty, which is not the freedom to do good, but rather the absence of restriction. It is, in fact, libertinism. And I guess that was what was on full display at the opening ceremony just about 10 days ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things with mention of pornography, in our last question. That's one of the things that I think is most prevalent, most prominent. You can most clearly see the results of the negative impact, the lasting influence of the French Revolution in the sexual revolution, because it's this idea that these things, which we recognized for ages as rightly ordered, as sort of guardrails in some sense for the soul, for morality, for society, these things are instead restrictions, that they are oppressive, and that's why we have this obsession now with oppression, and everything is, the LGBT movement is probably the most privileged movement ever. It's ascended to the highest echelons of political sanctity, of political privilege. It's adored by presidents, princes, everybody, and yet they still claim that they're oppressed. It's this obsession with this idea of oppression. It really is a notion of an absence, fighting for an absence of authority, rather than promoting any kind of look, we need freedom because there's good and we need to be free to do good. You can look at some actual instances of oppression, right? Like in the Middle East. I just read a story this morning actually about a girl who was burned over an open flat iron in the Middle East because she converted to Christianity. Wow. And she was a young woman. That's an example of oppression. You don't have the freedom to pursue the good, as opposed to the sort of liberty that the French revolutionaries adopted and advanced through their bloody revolution, is this idea of absolute, they call it freedom, but what is it really? If you look at something like pornography, that's enslaving. That's not freedom. It'd be free in the sense of nobody's stopping you. You know, you might not have your mom and dad over your shoulder. You might not have a filter on your laptop, but, you know, you're not free. You become enslaved to that thing. You look at any of these things, drug use, even marijuana, you know, these things become enslaving. You become accustomed to this habit, this lifestyle, any of these things. Vice always ends up becoming enslaving. And so we have the Christian, particularly the Catholic notion of freedom, which is the freedom to pursue virtue, which the French Revolution just completely repudiates.
We're going to run out of time here really quickly, but I really liked what you brought up about Dionysius, which is what they pushed back on. No, it's not the Last Supper. This is the image from that, was a Dutch painting from Dionysius's feast, which is fascinating because, as you say in the article, the Greek god of wine has often been erroneously compared to Christ by modernist scholars. Dionysius was, according to mythology, slain by the Titans and his flesh consumed, but was later raised from the dead. I mean, that's a very interesting parallel. It seems to be a layer of complexity and sophistication by the evildoers here to try to mock God even that much more. It's the Last Supper and it's Dionysus. It's both and. It's not either or. Would you say that's fair?
I'd certainly say that's fair. It's like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien talked about. Lewis thought all religion was myth, and he thought Christianity was included in that. And Tolkien pointed out to him, sparking Lewis's conversion, what if one myth, that of Christ, were just true? And we have the true myth. We've known that for 2,000 years, and they still insist on this idea of, well, this other myth, you know, what if they're all just myth? It's this very Freemasonic idea, which I don't think we have time to get into, but this Freemasonic idea of, by all being equally true, they're all actually equally false.
Yeah, I wish we had more time for that because, in fact, there was a good section on just the Freemason aspect of this. The deist Robespierre, one of the masterminds of the French Revolution, who himself would find the guillotine, only he had to look up at it instead of down, which I thought that was fascinating too. We'll put a link to this article, which is extensive and detailed. You should check it out today from the Washington Stand, WashingtonStand.com. We'll link to it directly in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Sam McCarthy, thanks for your time today. Appreciate having you on the team.
Thanks, Joe. God bless.
All right, coming up after the break, let's talk about what it took to finally get the Vatican to put out a statement about the Olympics. It's just mind-boggling. The guy who runs the leftovers of the Ottoman Empire had to ask the Pope to say something. That is crazy. Dr. Anthony Stine's coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Which of these is the most difficult for you to objectively believe? Jonah lived in a whale? Moses heard God's voice in a bush? Peter's authoritative declarations would be backed by heaven? Or that Daniel survived the flames of fire? Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, the results. Most difficult was Jonah, then Daniel, then Moses. The easiest was Peter receiving authority to grant forgiveness. Secondly, the early church was tough. You see, that authority granted to Peter could put one out of the church due to sin, and that same authority was installed to bring one back into the church through personal confession. We understand that reconciliation with the church is inseparable from reconciliation with God. And thirdly, our Bibles are filled with promises, but this promise was to Peter, the apostles, and the generational successors of Peter known as the Catholic bishops. So here's an idea. Take a drive down your street, look up at a Catholic church, and just know this for a fact. That priest inside that church was ordained straight down through the lineage of St. Peter.
My name is Nathan Wigfield, Executive Director of the St. Thomas More House of Prayer, a Catholic retreat center in Cranberry, Pennsylvania, with the mission of praying and promoting the Liturgy of the Hours. I want to invite you to join us September 27th through the 28th for Vox Sponse, a retreat on the Liturgy of the Hours. In this overnight retreat, you will learn about the historical background and the theology of the Liturgy of the Hours, as well as receive practical instruction for how to pray the prayer of the Church. The cost is $120 per person. This includes talks, meals, and overnight accommodations. To find out more information or to register, visit liturgyofthehours.org/liturgyretreat. That's liturgyofthehours.org/liturgyretreat.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. Ground News reports Catholic bishops and cardinals demand official apology for Olympics opening ceremony. At least 24 Catholic bishops and 3 cardinals signed a letter demanding an apology from the International Olympic Committee for mocking the Last Supper during the Olympics opening ceremony. The 2024 Olympics opening ceremony received backlash for featuring drag queens at a feast resembling Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, with event organizers claiming it represented a pagan orgy feast instead. Bishop Robert Barron criticized the Olympic organizers' apology as patronizing and a masterpiece of woke duplicity, reflecting broader discontent among other Catholic leaders. And they also complain about them blocking my video on YouTube, just asking for a friend. Anyway, Epic Times reports U.S. Embassy warns American citizens in Lebanon to leave on any ticket available. Amid rising concerns over the recent Israel and Hezbollah growing conflict, the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon told its citizens that they should book any ticket available to them, while the UK Foreign Secretary's office called on British citizens to leave right now. U.S. citizens who lack funds to return to the U.S. may contact the embassy for financial assistance via the repatriation loans, U.S. Embassy said in Beirut on August 3rd, adding that flights by some commercial airlines have already begun to be canceled in recent days. And Catholic Vote is reporting that the Pope meets with trans-friendly nun at theme park. Pope Francis last week met with Sister Genevieve Giningros, a nun who has been working with LGBTQ identifying individuals for over 5 decades at the Italian amusement park where she lives. Giningros said in June that the LGBTQ theme park workers love Francis so much because this is the first time that a pope welcomes trans and gay people. And those are your headline news. Praise be to God. I know you saw some of this reportage over the weekend, and at least I did, that the Vatican finally has come out with a statement. We're going to go over that statement here in a moment. But it really was prompted not by, the heart of Pope Francis as much as the phone call from the guy who leads the Turkish government for the past 20 years, by the way. Erdogan has been in power there for 20 plus years. And he's a shady tree character, to say the least. But it took a phone call from this guy to prompt Pope Francis to actually come out with something about the Olympic opener and the shenanigans going on in Paris right now. Joining us to talk about all of this is Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition. Dr. Stine, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me on again.
Let's start with the statement itself. The Vatican News put out the statement. I guess it was Saturday night, which is also a weird time. They don't typically put out statements in the middle of the night. So tell me about the statement. What did they say exactly?
They said the most lukewarm, ecumenical kind of statement I could have possibly imagined them saying. It was we feel saddened that people felt it was okay to offend people's religious sensibilities, and that people of all religions were bothered by this. Instead of there's respect due to Almighty God, and that perhaps we shouldn't mock the most sacred points in the history of our Lord's earthly mission.
What I found interesting about that,
synodal.
Right? It's sort of this wishy-washy, who knows what, very lukewarm. I mean, Bishop Robert Barron, whom we've been critical of in the past, Bishop Robert Barron was spot on in this regard. He was far more pointed. He was far more critical and far more not putting up with it than what we're seeing out of the Vatican. What does that tell us?
That even the most sort of moderate of American bishops, like Bishop Barron, is pretty moderate on the grand scale of an ecclesiastical hierarchy, is still far more oriented towards the faith than, frankly, what looks like is coming out of Rome. How hard is it for them to say, Christ is king, he is God, and is deserving of some respect? You don't have to invoke the feelings of the laity in this. You don't. maybe if you want to, you can make something about how it's just in bad taste to attack people's religion on the world stage like that. But these people who did this knew what they were doing. I mean, because they tried to tell us this wasn't actually a mocking of the Last Supper. But, if you actually read things written by people who know a thing about art history, they'll tell you that this was actually painted by a Dutch painter back in the 17th century, specifically to mock the Last Supper. It was specifically making fun of Da Vinci's painting. And I would not be that surprised if these organizers didn't know that that's what that painting's purpose was. But I'm going to err on the side of they knew exactly what they were doing, and they just didn't think that there would be enough of an outcry for anybody to care. Because oftentimes,
even if it were true, though, Dr. Stine, even if it were true, and let's just say that they didn't know, they had no idea. Let's just say that for the sake of the conversation. Okay, fine, you didn't know. So you chose to mimic an image that depicts a pagan orgy feast. That's not better.
There's the basic taste. That's not good
either.
Well, in some ways, this reminds me of the rather spooky, 2012 London Games opening where they had their tribute to the NHS, and it included the Grim Reaper, dancing around.
Yes.
Why are you tributing your health system that's supposed to keep people alive by having death there? Right?
Yeah.
So
bizarre.
Sometimes the cultural elites are so out of touch with reality that they think things are that really terrible ideas that they have, they think are actually really cool, but they tend to alienate the people they're trying to reach out to. And the point with the result being that until this year, the Olympic ratings have been down a lot year after year after year. It was sort of like the Academy Awards. It's just this is the first Olympic Games since the pandemic was completely past. In 2022, there were still pandemic restrictions during the Winter Olympics. And in 2020, they couldn't play those till 2021 because of the pandemic. So I think people have almost forgotten what the Olympics were like. And then they turned this on. Now, for those wondering, the 2028 Summer Olympics are in Los Angeles. And I don't know what Kamala Harris has said about this, but I know that Donald Trump has stepped forward and said, not on his watch if he's president. So just throw that one out there, that this is even becoming a political issue.
Boy, I'm gonna not go down that rabbit hole for a second. I want to ask you, why do you suspect that the Vatican was silent on this issue when bishops and certainly the lay faithful have been outraged by what took place in the opening ceremony? Why do you suspect the Vatican, Pope Francis himself, was silent for 8-9 days?
Well, the Olympics are probably the most widely accepted of essentially global, right? I mean, that's the oldest running program of globalism. It's where relatively normal people come together to entertain people. It's where they get the entire world to watch. One defender of the ceremony from a Catholic media outlet, I think it was the National Catholic Reporter or American Magazine, one of them said that this has done more to instill world unity, the Olympics has, than the UN could ever possibly dream of doing. And Pope Francis has famously held conferences for the same kinds of people doing other things, nonprofit work and, World Economic Forum adjacent organizations at the Vatican. He was holding these like every 3 months or something until the pandemic. And then afterward, we started having. And I almost wonder if it's because he didn't want to alienate them, which is why the statement you got was 3 sentences long. If you want to pull it up, prove me wrong. Yeah. It's 3 sentences long.
I've got it.
And it's the most, and it is the most ecumenical, non-offensive thing possible.
Yeah, let me read this real quick. I'll read it. I'll quote it entirely just so it's on the record here. Quote, "The Holy See was saddened by certain scenes during the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympic Games." The statement reads and goes on, "and can only join the voices that have been raised in recent days to deplore the offense caused to many Christians and believers of other religions," closed quote. It goes on, the statement continues, at a prestigious event where the whole world, I love that, at a prestigious event. Can't even actually say the opening ceremony. Like we got to get some cryptic language. It goes on, at a prestigious event where the whole world comes together to share common values. There should be no illusions, ridiculing the religious convictions of many people. Yes, many Christian people. This is the Last Supper we're talking about here. I don't think the Buddhists care all that much about that.
This reminds me of Google and certain political figures referring to Easter worshipers.
Right.
It's the same kind of dodging of calling people Christians or Catholics.
It's bizarre.
I expect better even from this Vatican. I'm not exactly a fan of the people running the church these days, but I expect better at least from them.
Well, one of the points
had a lot of margin. You've been reporting on the letter from the 24 bishops or whatever, and there's a lot of bishops from across the internal church divide signing that letter. That's a much better statement.
Exactly. One of the points from the Erdogan story that John Allen Jr. reported from Crux, we'll put a link to this in the show notes as well. An Olympic controversy. Erdogan turns out to be the Francis whisperer. This is John Allen's headline. Okay, let that sink in. John Allen wrote that about Pope Francis. Like, if you know John Allen and where he stands on the issues, I find that fascinating. But nonetheless, this is where we're at. He points out that, Erdogan made this phone call, compelled Francis to put out something in regards to the story. It's, his silence is deafening. And then there's speculation as to why he was silent in the article. And here's the kicker. Here's the Cliff Notes. He's pulling a Pius XII move here. Why was Pius XII so quiet about the persecution of Jews during the Second World War? Well, a lot of people speculate on that. A lot of ink has been spilt upon that subject. I don't think these things are at all equal, in my opinion, but the suggestion is Pope Francis is concerned. He's silent about Russia and the Ukraine because he wants peace there. He's silent about what happens in China because of the persecution of Chinese Christians. Do you see a parallel there? Is Pope Francis being silent because maybe he's afraid that transgendered people will be mocked or persecuted and they won't come back into the church? Is there anything fair to say there?
That one might be, that last one might be part of it, because there was certainly a homosexuality angle to all of this. If you actually watch the footage, it was a degenerate feast, which again blows the mind that they thought this would be the right thing to do, to broadcast on television to literally every country in the world except maybe North Korea. Why would you think that was a good idea when there are still rather large portions of the planet that have sensible attitudes on a cultural level towards these kinds of sinful inclinations? So I don't understand their thinking on this, but was Pope Francis afraid of alienating? I mean, if you've been following the Synod of Synodality the way I have to, then you know that the inclusion of homosexuals in the life of the church is something they're going to be discussing in 2 months' time when the next phase begins, and then in the working groups afterwards. In the working groups afterwards, German theologians have been placed in those working groups that'll be happening next spring. They are going to overtly be talking about the need for the church to change its moral teachings on homosexuality. And
wow,
that I'm almost certain had to play a big thing in this, because you can't have the Pope publicly condemn a display of homosexual culture, basically, like that, and then a year later signing some document that maybe softens the church's language at the very least on what the church says on these things. If you don't believe that can happen, revisit the Amoris Laetitia debates in the years leading up to it.
There you go. Hold that thought. Dr. Anthony Stine's our guest. We're talking about this story about the Vatican finally coming out. Is it a day late and a dollar short? Is the statement a little bit too weak? Let's put up a poll, producer Jake, on the feed there and get your take. Plus, we'll go into the after show and ask you directly what you think, and we'll be reading those comments for you. All of that and more still to come. But I want to come back to this parallel with Pope Pius XII and him. I find that very fascinating. I don't have a problem with the Pope meeting with transgender people. I have a problem with him acting like they can be just like that for the rest of their life. Let's talk more about that on the other side of this break. More to come. Share us with a friend. We'll be right back.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
What you're offering and giving to me, you deserve to get back because you're offering more than I can give.
I learned so much through the Station on the Cross. I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it.
I was attending the chapel and places like that, and through your programs, I was able to find out how other Protestants had come back into the Catholic Church. God bless the Station of the Cross.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
When I was outside of the church, there was always an unsettled feeling. There was always a feeling of something missing and something not complete. The deal clincher is we found our way to our parish, and we met just an incredible pastor. We learned things that we'd never been taught. I wouldn't be the person that I am without the church and without the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist. I can't live without it.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church, visit catholicscomehome.org.
Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's great to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, you're down to your last 5 days to get signed up for our big conference and gala dinner in Niagara Falls, August the 24th. I'm giving the first talk of the day, and I got to tell you, part of the reason why I'm so fascinated by the story of the Pope finally making a statement and what John Allen from Crux put out is because of the link to Pius XII. Part of my talk is going to be about the conspirators who tried to assassinate Adolf Hitler, the Catholic-led conspiracy there. I find that incredibly fascinating. So come join us for the event. We're going to have lots of conversation. Bishop Strickland's going to be there, Father Mateg, Raymond Arroyo, Mother Miriam, Jim Havens, and even Candace Owens is going to share a bit about her journey. Why did she become Catholic? What's leading her further into the Catholic faith? Why is she going down the road of traditionalism? We're going to get that from her at the conference and the gala dinner. More information at thestationofthecross.com. Got 5 days. You do need to hurry. Thestationofthecross.com for those details. Dr. Anthony Stine is our guest. We're talking about this story, the Vatican finally speaking out, a day late and feels to me like a dollar short. Weak sauce right now. We asked the question, was the Vatican statement on the Olympics sufficient? 0% have said yes so far. 86% say no. 14% say fine, but could have been better. So that's where we're at. We'll get more of your take in the after show. Dr. Stein, welcome back to the show. So I like this connection to Pius XII for a number of reasons. But I got to say, I just at the outset, I don't have a problem with Pope Francis meeting with abortionists, globalists, or transgendered people, or anybody. I feel like the Pope should be able to confront any human being on planet Earth at any time for the purpose of calling them to conversion and trying to bring them closer to the faith. And it should be by design that the Vicar of Christ on earth has one of the best opportunities to reach those people than anybody else. So let's not squander the opportunity. Meet with them, plant that seed, encourage them to come into the faith. But too often, I argue, we don't see that. We see a meeting and then nothing further. What say you?
I would have loved to have heard a call to conversion, but unfortunately, it's not even that. And we don't even get anywhere even close to that, because what we got was this weekend. I don't know if you heard about this weekend, but on August 1st, the National Catholic Reporter, as well as some of the typical similar outlets, reported that Father James Martin received a handwritten letter from Pope Francis congratulating him on his big conference he was having this weekend for essentially homosexuals in the church. And this wasn't this wasn't courage. Okay, this wasn't courage. Right, this wasn't the courage conference where truly some of the most courageous Catholics you'll ever encounter were people who carry the cross of same-sex attraction, but choose to live accordance to the church and its actual teachings and to the law of God and all the rest of it by not indulging in those things, but instead living as they're called to. Not that. It's quite the opposite of that, actually. These are the people who want to change the church's teaching on these things. Some of these advocates talk about how the church needs to basically reevaluate its teaching in light of the current cultural situation, and that what people should be called to do is to call to live in loving relationships, basically.
Dr. Stine, you're breaking up there. Can you repeat that last part, please? This isn't, like the Courage Conference, where at Courage people are essentially given the support they need to not embrace those inclinations, but instead they're at this conference, they were told that the church needs to change its teaching and get with the times and change its teachings to fit the new cultural environment out there. And that instead what they suggest is that people have the moral norms that are given to straight Catholics, quote unquote straight Catholics, and told to live according to those, but as homosexuals. Now think about that for a second. That's a lot said between the lines, right? They're told loving relationships are committed and all the rest. Well, what does that sound like? That sounds they're trying to get the church to embrace gay marriage. I've been saying this. I've said this a number of times. The Pope doesn't need to come out and say something that's material heresy. He can ride that line extremely close because he knows there are Jimmy Martins out there. There are lots of bishops and cardinals wearing red hats that'll happily take that ball and cross the line for him. It creates enough confusion that the Pope rides the line between heterodoxy and orthodoxy, which is a scandal in and of itself. The church, the hierarchy, the magisterium, their job is to provide clarity and to unify the body, provide clarity to the faithful, and form us in the truth itself. But we see more and more on increasing levels a diabolical cloud of confusion that pervades all of society. And I think statements that the Vatican put out Saturday in regards to this are a further example of that. We didn't get clarity; we got more ambiguity. We don't get the kind of leadership that we actually need here. We get more of the same, and this is a major problem. I see it's getting worse, and I say that to say, I don't know how you get to what St. Paul talks about in Thessalonians about the great apostasy, so that the great man of perdition can finally make his stage debut. I don't know how you get to that world unless you get to an increasing amount of diabolical confusion. The average lay folk cannot see right from wrong, truth from error, and we are just being led astray all along the way from almost every part of society. Do you think that's a fair statement? I mean, are we looking at this diabolical confusion as part of the master plan?
I think people have forgotten that what Sister Lucia said in the 1960s, which is that a diabolic disorientation has entered the church. It's the absolute truth, and it's more on display now than ever before. And I do think that a lot of the spiraling that we've seen of the secular world is because the Catholic Church no longer stands up and says no to some of the worst excesses of the secular world. It doesn't happen anymore, and hasn't happened since the McCarrick crisis in 2003, right, of the clerical sex abuse crisis. That since that time, it seems like the church has been afraid to stand up, because what happened? 4 years later, 4 years later, after 2003, Pope Benedict tried to stand up in his famous Regensburg address, talk about some really tough things going on at the time, and he was completely shredded by everybody. It's as if the church lost its moral authority at the time because of its allowing of homosexuals into the priesthood. Because when you look at those numbers, see that it wasn't small children they were touching for the most part. It was teenagers, and there were men, young men being touched by older men. What is that? That is There's a word for that. And unfortunately, it looks like they're holding conferences right now to try to get the churches to get the church's teaching on all this stuff to change.
It's crazy.
It's all connected.
Going back to Pius XII here for just one moment before we have to say goodbye to the radio audience. Pius XII was very quiet for a lot of people. They didn't like the fact that he didn't make stronger statements, but in fact, he did make public statements, and some of those statements got a lot of people in a lot of trouble. So he tempered that. But here's the bottom line, and I was just, because I'm reading a couple of books to prepare for my talk later this month in New York, 1,000 Jews were hauled off out of Rome once the Nazis took over Rome after the fall of Mussolini. 1,000 Jews were taken off to concentration camps. 5,000 Jews were protected by Pius XII at the Vatican, convents and monasteries and institutions all over the city of Rome, because Pius XII encouraged everyone in the church to do what they could to help. He was willing to forge documents and even lie about the status of those people to save their life. He also formed a spy network that helped to facilitate the German generals who hated Adolf Hitler and the government of the UK to help negotiate a peace after they assassinated Adolf Hitler. He put his Jesuits and many Catholics on the line, some of which were killed in the process, to try to bring about the death of Adolf Hitler. Those are facts. Those are facts. I don't think it's the same as what we're seeing here. And I don't. That's why that comparison to the silence of Pope Francis, I find utterly astounding. We're not even close to dealing with the same things here. And yet here we are. More ambiguity at best. Dr. Stine, thank you for being on with us. We'll go into the after show and get your opinion. It's coming up next. We'll see you there. God love you.
So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for the Station of the Cross, Joe McClain, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
And we're back. Welcome to the after show, everyone. Happy Monday.
Good morning, everybody. I like the poll in the chat group. Whose poll is better, Damon's or producer Jake's? So far,
important question.
33% say Damon, 67% say producer Jake. I feel like it's a biased poll. I'm not sure we can trust the results.
I think I'm the only one who voted for Damon's, because there's only 3 votes.
I voted for him too.
Okay, good.
I voted for him.
He got his up 2 seconds before I did.
So we
what was the subject of the poll?
Well, the inside joke here is we have been using the poll on YouTube because it allows us to put polls. I can't put a poll on Facebook or Rumble. I don't know why that's not a feature on either one of those. But Damon, one of our insiders on the Telegram group, the private Telegram group for the show, he discovered you can put a poll there. So he started duplicating the polls in the Telegram group as well as what we put on to YouTube. So the inside joke there is, they're duplicating the process. Jake duplicated the process. The poll itself, the question is, what was the Vatican statement on the Olympics sufficient? And on YouTube, 91% say no, 9% say fine, but could have been better. On the Telegram group poll, on the Jack Burton version, 86% say no, 14% say fine, could have been better. And then on the Damon version, 87% say no, 13%. So we're pretty much in line all across the board. The vast majority of everybody says that it is not a sufficient statement. I mean, it's not even close to being sufficient. The fact that they put it out Saturday night when nobody's paying attention, what does that tell you about the whole thing? By the way, good morning to you, Jack. Trad Jack Burton, Tweed and Toe, going to be at the Niagara Falls event. I'm sure he'll be wearing his wool. He'll probably have his pipe there. He's doing the traditional trad thing, the Uber trad thing.
Are you implying I'm not going to be wearing linen instead in August?
It's Buffalo. It's going to be 18 degrees below with 4 feet of snow outside.
Yeah,
what are we talking about?
This is true.
I have to bring a shovel with me in the van. I'm so worried about it. Hey, Janice, good morning to you. Becky Hansen, Damon, of course. on the team today. Good morning to you, Troy Lockett, Karen Andy Bashaw, Yvonne, Paul. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Mateus from sunny California. Good morning. Alejandro Rodriguez up early today, also from California. Good morning to you. Praise be to God. Thanks for being on the team today. I'm scrolling backwards. James 16897. Good morning to you. Thanks for being on with us today. Patty, our friend. Way to go, Jake, says Patty. Linda, good morning to you. Don Franco says Danny Boyle, the film director of Train Spotting fame, choreographed that UK Olympic opener. That should tell you everything. The Olympic openers have been bizarre for a number of years. I thought that the Madrid game opener with the giant mechanical bull and the offering of the Wiccans there, or whatever they actually were, I don't know, but they looked like Wiccans to me, really was bizarre. And then, of course, there was the COVID, the foreshadowing of the COVID games that you mentioned. Which games were those, Dr. Stein?
2012. So, pretty sure
those were
2012. In 2008. I don't know. It was, like you said, a lot of them have been weird. And I fear what's going to happen in 2028, honestly.
Right.
Americans can do some really cringy stuff. We can come up with some really pagan stuff if we really want it, if we put our mind to it.
Okay, so let's do some spitballing here. So put some money on this. We should do like an office pool kind of thing. I'm going to say that they're going to come up with some Aztec religious thing themed because it's Los Angeles.
Yeah, practically another country there. Yeah. I
wasn't
don't know.
it?
I think
wasn't it in
be...
California that they instituted the Aztec prayers in grade school?
It might have been, but I thought that got tossed out of the course
crushed
or something too, didn't it?
I certainly hope it did.
Yeah. I
don't know.
You may see the religion of diversity put on full display.
Didn't we
That's
just? I mean, but that one's been done.
It is a religion.
Where's the originality?
Right,
That's what they just did.
Most of the rest of the world has kind of moved on past that stuff. Not America. Nope. It's the religion of the land at this point.
Yeah, it sure is. The bizarro times we live in.
Because it's Los Angeles, Los Angeles, you know what you're absolutely going to see there? Hollywood. Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's going to be diversity, because it's Hollywood. I mean, it's the Hollywood game, basically.
Edward Clancy, good morning to you. He says, when confronted with the idea that the Eucharist was a symbol, Flannery O'Connor said, quote, "If it's just a symbol, to hell with it," close quote. Yeah, exactly. We got to start believing. Something I said during the gospel commentary was, Jesus is God. Let the chips fall where they may. I mean, that's either true or it's not, right? Like, if he's God, then your whole life has to be oriented around that.
When you first brought me on today, that news read you were doing, at the very end, you sounded very defeated. It was a very defeated sounding sigh after the meeting with transgender story.
Yeah. Well, it's because that's where we're at, right? Like, it's just like, again, I remember years ago, I interviewed a guy by the name of Andreas. I think it's not Andreas Files, or God, that's not his name. His first name is Andreas. His last name is escaping my memory, but I am old and it is early on a Monday morning. So that's my excuse. He is the former Swiss Guard. He teaches at the CUA or something I forget now where he teaches. He's a professor. He's taught business and like entrepreneurship for a number of years. He's written a few books. Well, he came out with his book about like when he became a Swiss Guard under JP2 and sharing his story or whatever. And I remember talking to him at the time, and he shared a story about how when he was a young 19-year-old in Rome for the first time, kind of, feeling like alone and homesick or whatever. And there was a warlord from Africa coming to visit the Pope. And he said some Swiss Guard actually rebelled. They protested to their commander. And he said, why are we going to put our lives on the line to protect this evil warlord, dude? Andreas Widmer. Thank you, Lynn Pine. You're amazing. Andreas Widmer. And the commander said, well, first of all, you're going to do your job. Second of all, because who knows Like, this may be the one opportunity anybody on the world, in the world, on the planet, might have to try to plant a seed and change a man like that. This is part of the Pope's job, is to meet these people because no one else can. When he said that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. I can get this. So from that point on, I really never had any issues with the Pope meeting crazy people. My only issue is you can meet crazy people, but your job is to try to change them as best you can. Maybe you're not successful at it. Fine, fair enough.
Yeah,
but at least you tried.
You're forgetting something. We now live in the spirit of a dialogue and accompaniment.
Right.
And the churches that you can't have accompaniment and all this other stuff in an era of that calling conversion. You cannot call people to conversion and have synodal dialoguing with them. It just, the two are not compatible in the slightest.
Yeah. Your internet is no fun today, by the way. Your internet is breaking up. What's going on?
I think there are storms blowing through, aren't there?
No,
I know Buffalo's getting hit.
It's just that.
By
let me put it to this way: my internet is worse at my house than anywhere it was on my road trip that I took. I got my Google Maps. I got my Google Maps notification this morning for how much I drove in July. 5,000 miles in July.
I know what that feels like. I used to have satellite internet at our house for a long time.
Yeah, I don't have. People keep telling me to switch to Elon Musk's service.
Yeah,
but I've got messages from people who have it, and they said it wouldn't solve my problem. It's not very good for streaming. There are YouTubers who use it for live streaming, and to make it work, that is hideously expensive.
Yes, exactly.
There looks like
not a good option.
A company looks like laying fiber optic cable in my town now, and I need to get on their mail list for when it happens, because if fiber optic cable will take care of my problem immediately.
I was just out in Oklahoma, up at the Clear Creek Abbey, and in the middle of nowhere, literally, and they had fiber optic. I was blown away.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how good the internet was out there.
My town doesn't. The internet provider that I have at this moment has one guy laying fiber optic cable in town. For the last year, I periodically go over one guy, literally one guy, and I have gone to their office and asked, "Hey, is my neighborhood wired for this yet?" And they look, they're like, "Nope, we don't know when either," because it's literally one guy doing it. So this other company is now saying, "Hey, you got to come down my street, man."
Yeah,
look, there's some public infrastructure right near my house that could really use that fiber optic cable. So
that's right.
Put it down there, and then just happen to hang it right at this one turn and wire that street, and we're okay.
Hey, listen here, buddy. I called your boss, Benjamin. He said for you to come down my road. I'm going to leave these Benjis for you, pal. Oh, man, that's rough stuff. Hey, good morning to you, female Casey, Royals fan from Nebraska. I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. Says, I have fiber optic in my city. It's a great -1 hiccup last week during the bad storm. Yeah, we got fiber to the house. Praise be to Jesus. Except for when there's a slight moisture in the air, a storm, a kind of a breeze, then all of a sudden we have no power, no electricity for days on end. So thank you, Centerpoint Energy, for being so awesome in the 4th largest city in America. You're just the best. KSW Benedict and Oblate, good morning to you. Brandon Joseph, Helen Grace. Jay is back on the team today. Good morning to you, Jay. Laura, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Glad you're here. Miriam, Angel Knight, welcome and good morning. Angie, good morning to you. Patricia Matthews, good morning. Good morning. Glad you guys are here today. Laura says the final battle between Satan and the kingdom of God is over family and marriage. The Immaculate Heart of Mary will triumph. It's an ugly battle, isn't it? It really is truly a disgusting war. And I think too many Catholics are not up for the challenge. I had a great conversation with somebody that will remain nameless over the weekend who's in the same business. I shared with them how much my life has changed because of Cardinal McCarrick. My career has changed. I had to commit career suicide after Cardinal McCarrick, because I felt like I couldn't just pretend anymore. I couldn't just hope it all goes away or ignore the difficulties in the world and, protect my career, my advancement, my opportunities, and just make sure people like me. I just couldn't do it anymore. So, but there's a lot of people in my business who are happy to continue to play it safe, play nice.
To make it sound like that most things are fine in the church right now.
Right. Right. Exactly.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, it's tough. I get it because listen, I have 6 kids to feed. I'm the only income, and 501c3 work means not a lot of money. Okay, so I don't get rich. I mean, if you're 501c3 and you're the Knights of Columbus CEO, well, yeah, you make a lot of money. You make $2 million a year. Okay, there's a lot of people in the 501c3 world that probably do make good money, but I'm not one of them. Neither is producer Jake. So we do what we can. So career suicide is kind of a serious thing. So that's another reason number 777 why I'm so grateful for the Station of the Cross. Not a lot of people are trying to hire me right now. Station of the Cross is courageous and bold.
People can't believe when I tell them that by having my YouTube channel, I will never get a job in any Catholic organization.
Right.
It's just never going to happen.
It's not a thing.
I worked for a Catholic university 5 years ago, a little longer ago than that now. They closed in 2017, so 7 years ago. I worked for a Catholic university. I've never asked some of the people who were my former coworkers when that place closed, who got jobs at the diocese, if the diocese pays attention. But I also know I don't need to ask that question because I already know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
The logical thing is if you got somebody like me or you in the diocese, they just keep tabs on you. Just make sure you're not going too far.
Big time, yeah. I love when you read job descriptions. I used to read job descriptions all the time. I don't do it anymore. But back in the day, years ago, I would always be on the lookout for what was out there, what was available. And especially diocesan positions, it would read something like this. PhD required, 87 years of experience, pays $47,000 a year. Like, what are we talking about? Like, who can live off of these salaries? They're so terrible. It's I can't imagine what student loans are like at the PhD level. It's like, oh my heavens, you people are crazy.
This is why it blows my mind when people say, I don't understand why there's a populist uprising in the United States right now. Why a buffoon like Trump is so popular. I'm like, have you applied for a job recently?
Right.
Have you? If you have, in the last 5 years, 6 years, if you have, then you know why people are upset.
Yeah.
Have you noticed your gallon of milk now costs $3 more than it used to?
Exactly.
Maybe more than that. Your eggs cost more. You notice that the cost of those organic pasture-raised eggs aren't that much more now than just normal eggs anymore.
Oof, rough stuff. By the way, Los Creole says, hey, Joe, tomorrow anniversary of the martyrdom of Garcia Moreno, the greatest manifestation of integralism under a republic. Dios no muere. Oh, you're making me want to do something about that. Like have somebody on tomorrow to talk about Moreno. That might be very fascinating.
I think it's a great opportunity for a showdown of saints from democracies and republics versus saints from monarchies. I think that'd be a great opportunity. How many monarch saints versus how many president saints? That'd be a great opportunity.
Would find some way to whittle the monarchy into all
final
of this.
showdown. No, I love Moreno. Moreno's awesome. That's
he is
literally
awesome.
that. He is the example of a republic.
He's the guy you want to vote for.
Yes, exactly. If you're going to insist on somehow getting the will of the people who are so trustworthy and wonderful, the will of the people involved, you can't really. It's hard to do better than Moreno. I think. Wonderful.
I may work on that. We'll see. I'm supposed to interview a Department of Homeland Security whistleblower today. For tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. But Magnificat says the Church of Nice fired me. It's a true story. I had a front row seat to that. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Says, Joe, can you ask Anthony what Anthony thinks of the A2 milk marketing scam? The A2 milk. What is A2 milk? I don't even know what you're talking about.
A2 milk is milk that has protein that is that people who have problems drinking milk often can have an easier time with. It tends to be a slower metabolizing protein. And what is it? It's not creatine. What is the other one? There are two kinds. There's several kinds of whey proteins. And there's one that I can't remember the name of because it's been a long time since I've used a protein powder. But they're ones that bodybuilders like to take, and they'll drink it before they go to bed because it metabolizes more slowly. So it gives them like protein synthesis all through the night, help build up those muscles. And it's A2 protein is apparently the same thing. But as far as the scam goes, I don't know what the scam is. There's I can barely find A2 A2 milk in my town, except for one location, and that's at a Brahms, which is an Oklahoma fast food chain that is now moving around the heartland. I was a little surprised. I drove into Texas a few months ago. The first time we took a road trip into Texas to go to Buc-ee's of all things, and I passed a Brahms in North Texas. I was like, really? Okay, because they're in Oklahoma. They were found in Oklahoma City, but they sell A2 milk in their fast food chains, and actually in like their little, they have a little grocery store section in their restaurants. But I don't know what they mean by a scam.
Yeah. I don't know either. Magnificat, he's one of those conspiratorial people. He thinks we didn't land on the moon. I mean, he thinks 9/11 was an inside job. He probably thinks Thomas Matthew Crooks was not the only shooter. I'm guessing. I know the guy personally, by the way.
Well, that one is real easy to believe. Some of those kind of alternative hypotheses for, as I would call them, because the official line doesn't make any sense anymore.
It doesn't, does it?
No, there are just too many things that went wrong for that to be like, yeah, that was fine. That was just people making a mistake.
Jay asks a question. Why did everyone forget St. Dominic's feast, August 4th? Nobody remembered the greatest saint in church history received the most Holy Rosary. Did you take a poll from everybody? I'm not sure everybody forgot. Personally, I think there's probably quite a few people who did remember. Like, say, every Dominican out there probably remembered his feast day. I'm going to go on a limb and say that's probably the case.
Jay, even we at our parish, we sang a hymn in honor of Our Lady of the Rosary and a setting of the Ave Maria to honor Our Lady giving
You may
the
not have
Rosary
heard
to
much
Saint
about
Dominic,
it.
So it was on a Sunday, so yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it fell on a Sunday. That's why
obviously the Dominicans would have celebrated his feast because it's the patronal feast. But I think you didn't hear that much about. I mean, I'm assuming you said you go to a Dominican church, Jay. I'm assuming they mentioned it.
If they didn't, you need to ask them.
Yeah,
why
maybe you should be asking them and not us.
Like, what are we talking about here, people? Well, Dominicans these days, it's a mixed bag, bro. It's a real mixed bag.
Also, in the modern calendar, he's celebrated on the 8th. Because he died on the 6th. He died on the Feast of the Transfiguration. So in the traditional calendar, they celebrate him on the 4th. And in the modern calendar, they celebrate him on the 8th, either 2 days before or 2 days after. But his actual birthday into heaven was on the 6th. There you go.
Home That I Love says A2 is delicious. I didn't even know it existed, to be honest with you, until just now. So I'm learning something new. I, of course, don't drink milk.
A lot of carnivore influencers swear by this stuff. They tell you if you're going to drink milk, that's the milk to drink.
Yeah, I don't drink milk.
Or raw milk. They tell you to drink raw milk if you can get it. But I mean,
if you can get it, right?
Raw milk.
I did a video on my carnivore channel for that.
If you can get it and not go to prison at the same time, right? Because they've been really trying to put a stop to the distribution of raw milk lately. It seems to be getting out of hand, arresting. These young YouTube ladies, I think was a month or two ago or whatever. It's crazy. We live in crazy times. Hey, Flying Tigers is here. Look at that. Always a good start to the week when you have Anthony Stine on. Flying Tigers, welcome back. I was just thinking about you the other day. Did you get moved? Are you settled? Are you good? How's the book coming? I mean, hopefully everything is moving straight along on Malachi Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can I trigger you guys a little bit? So,
oh no,
raise your hand if you're the kind of Catholic who thinks that Henry V, the French monarch, who is the direct successor to Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. Raise your hand if you're on the team and you think that's going to happen. I read a book over the weekend. I didn't really read the book. I went in audiobook form. I got an audiobook of the DNA test done to try to prove or disprove the claimants of that story.
So the bourbon line is not the one that's actually legitimate, apparently, according to DNA.
So according to this book, now, listen, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just pointing it out. So the cliff notes of this book is, so they've got the bourbon line. They've got a particular family who have made claims now for a very long time that the 10-year-old boy, the son of Marie Antoinette, escaped, and a different boy died in his place. And he would go on, he would die in his 60s, and he would have children, and that line got to continue. That's the claim. And there's a family out there claiming that that's true, that they're that line, etc. Well, this book said that there's been DNA studies done. They took DNA samples from hairs from that line and compared them to Marie Antoinette and her sisters. They have hair follicles from both. And they also tested Marie Antoinette's relatives that are alive today and took all of that information to compare next to. And they said there is no match with this family who says that they're the successors. They said there's no match. And they did more than one test. Then there's a heart. So there's a heart, a relic, that was claimed to belong to the 10-year-old boy who died in that tower. And the heart itself has an interesting history. It's kind of like say, the Sudarium of Ovoidum. You know, it's got this. You've got this interesting history of its path through time. Who owned it when is kind of interesting. The bottom line is they tested the heart, and the heart DNA matched perfectly to Marie Antoinette. What does it mean? Well, if that's true, the boy died at 10. The heart belongs to a little boy. The boy died at 10 in the tower. No possibility that there is a successor down that line. Did Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI have a different child? I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I don't know, but that's what the book said.
I have always assumed, since I tend to find the great Catholic monarch prophecy is interesting, I've always assumed, which if you're not sure familiar with what that is, people aren't familiar with that, that's prophecies from various mystics throughout history that suggests rather strongly that there would come a time in which the world was spinning out of control and utterly decadent, and it would anger God and be a chastisement. And on the other side of the chastisement, order would be restored in France through the restoration of the monarchy there. And that this monarch would be crowned by an angelic pontiff, meaning a saintly pope who would restore order in the church. I've always assumed that if that was going to happen anytime soon, that this great Catholic monarch was probably going to come from the military. He's going to be a general with royal blood, with some royal bloodline, and that he was essentially going to use the military to take over after whatever happens that causes the collapse of that country. You know, right when that the Olympic opening ceremony happened, people were reminding people that there's a Catholic prophecy out there that says Paris will be destroyed for its crimes. Right, the whole city will burn to the ground.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing that makes me. I don't put, I cover a lot of prophecy. I don't spend that much time thinking about it because I've encountered many Catholics. It seems like their faith is in Catholic prophecy and not in the actual Catholic faith.
Yeah,
it's a dangerous temptation. So but in my own readings of it, it does seem like that would be the most logical thing, because anybody who's going to try to restore the monarchy there and get rid of the Republican form of government there is going to need to have the military on their side. That's really the only way you're going to be able to do that, is to have a general step forward, restore order, and then when the surviving members of the Masonic government there try to, form a new government, he just arrests them or worse.
KSB says
terribly friendly.
Yeah, KSB says the Venerable Holhauser back in the 1600s predicted the great monarch would come. Yeah, I talked about that in the documentary film that I put out in December on the End Times when I interviewed Joshua Charles. I also covered Dr. Taylor Marshall's book on the Book of Revelation, which I thought was great. It's a great book on the apocalypse. I would encourage everyone to check it out. I got the audiobook version. Kennedy Hall is the narrator of it. He did a wonderful job. It goes verse by verse throughout the entire book of the apocalypse, but he goes through Venerable Holhauser's work on predicting sort of the timing of events. So I would encourage you to check that book out. But the book that I went over this weekend, I'm going to share the title with you right now so you can know what I went through. It's called The Lost King of France: How DNA Solved the Mystery of the Murdered Son of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, written by Deborah Cadbury. Deborah Cadbury is the author of it. I can't vouch for it. I don't know Deborah. I don't know anything about Deborah or her politics or where she stands in the faith or anything else. But she did seem, when she talked about the DNA portion, she did seem to be just going through the facts of this is what they did and this is the results they came up with. She didn't really embellish beyond that. She didn't seem to have like sort of a biased opinion of the matter. She just was kind of going through it. So take that for whatever it's worth. But, listen, God is not stopped by any roadblocks, right? So if there's going to be a great monarch, and that monarch is definitely going to be a descendant of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, well then, God's will be done in all things. I can tell you that when Jesus claims to be the successor in the kingdom of David, there was a lot of people who were like, that's not possible. The king died when they were hauled off to Babylon. The king and the court were hauled off, never to be seen again. So it's not possible. There's a lot of people who didn't think that was possible, yet our Lord makes it clear that God can raise up descendants of Abraham even from the stones. So I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, but it ain't looking good for that line anyway. Hey, Lynn Pine says, we appreciate you, Joe, and everyone at the Station of the Cross and guests who courageously expose the evil all around us. Well, thank you for that. We do appreciate that very, very much. We lost Dr. Stine.
Had to go. Sorry. Yep.
He had to sign off.
I had his mic off, so to keep his conversation private or whatever, and then and then he was like, "Oh, goodbye," and left.
Brandon Joseph says he is combining the two bloodlines. It's all about the blood. We're going to find out, I guess. Jay says, Revelation, Xavier Reyes Ejol, whom we've had on the program a number of times. Steve tells Marie-Julie Jehani's prophecies about Henry V de la Croix. By the way, which is kind of interesting because, Jake and I are conspiring to produce a line of coffee under the banner of Henry V. Mm-hmm. We talked about that Friday. Behind the scenes. So we may be rolling out a brand of coffee beans for ACT insiders under the banner of Henry V. So we'll see. Alaric, good morning to you. Says allegedly there are other prophecies of the great monarch attributing him to be a descendant of various different monarchies, all of which are in the Habsburg blood. That's the other thing, too. It's like Marie Antoinette was Habsburg. Plenty of Habsburgs still alive. I've interviewed a Habsburg. I got to hang out with the ambassador when I was in Rome. That was kind of cool. And I think he's supposed to be back on the show in another couple of months. In October, he's going to be back on the program. So why can't it just be a Habsburg? That's the question. But I promise you this. If you vote for me as the Holy Roman Emperor, I will make it one of my primary duties to uncover who the actual monarch is and where they live and where they're at, when they're going to take over. That'll be a central task that I and my cabinet must perform for you. But you got to vote for me as Holy Roman Emperor. I would ask that you vote multiple times. You encourage your friends and your family, especially deceased ones, to vote many times for me as a Holy Roman Emperor. That'd be really great. Thank you in advance for that.
See, here I thought you were encouraging people to vote early, vote often in the fall elections, and I think that would be a dangerous thing to do.
That would be not good. But for Holy Roman Emperor, I just want to hedge my bet as much as possible because I don't have the Habsburg nose, so I have a lot going against me. I need to encourage as many votes as possible.
Chin. I thought that was the thing.
The
that
chin
they
or the nose? I forget. It's the chin, isn't it?
Without fail, at least once per week, Edward Habsburg is on Twitter responding to somebody's really stupid, making fun of the Habsburg chin. He's like, "Oh, this again," even though he doesn't have the Habsburg chin. The Habsburg chin isn't a thing anymore.
Mm-hmm. I asked him about that actually when I interviewed him, and he said, "Well, inbreeding will do that to you." So there was a lot of inbreeding in the Habsburg line.
If that's the worst way it manifests, count yourself lucky.
Yeah. He's a very interesting guy. I got to talked to him when I was in Rome. Great guy, enjoyable conversation. He's a fascinating character, to say the least. I'll be happy to talk to him again when he's back on. Marie Julie Jahani, yes, again, that was another one of those Henry V. We'll see how that goes. We'll see. I don't know. Well, I don't know. Again, if the DNA is to be believed, it's not looking good for the Bourbon line. I don't know. But I'm not worried about it either.
Several 100-year-old DNA that's been in the possession of what museums and government authorities over the years. I mean, to play a devil's advocate, it could have degraded or been a mistake.
If they can, if they can test, they can do carbon dating testing on fossils and get to the precision of billions of years, then why shouldn't we trust the DNA studies too? I mean, how many billions is it this time? I forget, but
I stopped keeping track.
It seems to every time they come up with another one, another line. By the way, I did out myself last week. I am a young Earth creationist, and I encourage everybody to watch that Protestant documentary film because there's not one better, unfortunately, from Catholics. There ought to be, but there isn't. As Holy Roman Emperor, I will produce a great documentary film on that. We're not, are we?
We have never been very good at making this kind of stuff in general, whether it's documentaries or movies in general. We're just probably because the Catholics in the West have gotten too subsumed by the culture. That's probably why we're not very good at it.
And Catholic filmmakers need to stop trying to play ball with Angel Studios. Just because they're the Hollywood alternative for now doesn't mean that's the best option for us. We need to create a parallel economy amongst Catholics, similar to what the Jews did throughout Europe and still do to this day. Catholics need to support Catholics. So when you hire a plumber, hire a Catholic plumber. When you need to produce a film, go to Catholics to help produce that film. I mean, it's just, we got to stop playing these games because this is part of the reason why there was critique on Cabrini. I liked the film Cabrini. It was beautifully filmed. I mean, beautifully filmed. But they they stripped it back to make it more palatable. Like, that's unfortunate. That's like, you did something great and beautiful. Do it even better next time. Like, make it more Catholic next time. That'd be amazing. But we play these games. We go to Angel Studios because, they'll take our film. Yeah, sure they will. Sure they will. If you play ball.
And then your movie will have very little to do with the faith when it's done, which was why I didn't bother to see Cabrini. I wasn't surprised when people I knew who wouldn't be so, we'll say, blinded in their critique of it towards personal loyalties they had because they may have known some of the filmmakers behind it.
I loved it. I liked the film, actually. My one critique was, I thought it was a beautiful film. I enjoyed watching it. I've certainly seen a lot of other films that were way worse, but it was clear that they scaled back those Catholic elements to more of a minimum to kind of squeak by. And I thought, that's a tragedy. The Holy Mass should have been depicted at the very minimum. It should have been depicted, and it wasn't. There was a lot to say that was good about the film, but that was definitely a big critique for sure.
Yeah, have you ever seen a movie, a Hollywood movie that takes place before the 1960s, that depicts a mass, and it's a Novus Ordo mass that they show? You ever seen something like that? Because I have. I don't remember the movie, but I've seen it.
Prior to 1960?
Yeah, it takes place prior to 1960, but it shows a Novus Ordo mass.
I'm trying to think of an example of that.
I've never seen one, but I've heard of it happening.
I don't think I've seen one either. I'm thinking of like, Joseph of Cupertino. That was definitely a traditional at Mass. My thing is, like, you think of like the Bells of St. Mary's, right? Like, they show the Mass, but not really. They just show the sermon. They don't really show the Mass.
A lot of older films, a lot of pre-council films about Catholicism kind of don't really show the Mass. There's a couple of exceptions, a couple of nice exceptions. There's a kind of obscure Deanna Durbin film noir that takes place around Christmas, and it explicitly shows high mass at midnight, like a solemn high mass at midnight. It's famous in trad circles for, like, really quite respectfully and lovingly depicting a beautiful Christmas Eve mass, Christmas midnight mass. It's quite neat. But mostly they kind of just, it's not really addressed. Like, yeah, we're fine having Catholics around, just don't show the Holy Sacrifice, the Mass. That's what it feels like in a lot of those films, even if they're surface level friendly towards Catholicism.
Yeah, there's just a real opportunity with great storytelling and great cinematography to do something more interesting and beautiful, because you typically don't get that package all in one place. You might get someone who shows Catholic elements, but maybe the cinematography is not up to snuff. I got to tell you, Cabrini was masterful in cinematography. Masterful. You will find there, like right now, I'm kind of a big behind the scenes movie kind of guy, nerd. So I like watching YouTube content that sort of breaks down how movies were made and talks about the cinematography style or whatever. And you get a lot of those kinds of videos with, like, Spielberg, for instance. This book's written about Spielberg's cinematography style. Alejandro Monteverde, who made Cabrini, he's a master. He really is great at that. I mean, it was so beautiful the way he shot that film Cabrini. So to not show the more Catholic elements, it's like, man, you were that, like, why get dressed up? Why gather all those people, put that kind of budget effort into it, and then not make it across the finish line? It's like, you were so close. You might as well just take it all the way. So I don't condemn Cabrini, because I did think there's so many good things to say about it, but at the same time, that's definitely a legit concern. And I would encourage him. I tried to interview him. I did reach out to their people. I did try, but there was no interest to reciprocate. I did have what's his name on the show? Verastigi. I did interview Verastigi over it, but other than that, there was no interest to reciprocate. Laura says that's a good movie. My dad made me watch them. Your dad forced you to watch them, eh? Did you? So right now, because I'm preparing for my talk, I'm going through the Church of Spies and Operation Gladio. Gladio is a bloody gut punch, man. Oh, have you ever read Operation Gladio, Dr. Stine?
No, I've not read that.
It's a gut punch. Have you ever read Church of Spies?
Is that? I haven't really delved too much into that. I mean, I just knew on the face of it that Pius XII, the accusation that Pius XII was some sort of Hitler lover, was ridiculous, and the kind of thing you would expect.
Oh yeah,
from
for sure.
Illiterate people who would want to tear the church down.
So,
but
Hitler,
no, I haven't delved into that.
Hitler created a spy network during the war that was very effective. So effective that the OSS, which would become CIA after the war, didn't want the good times to end, and they kept the good times rolling. The CIA, under Operation Gladio goes into all of this. The CIA basically got in bed with the mafia during the war. OSS got in bed with the mafia during the war. The mafia was at odds with fascism in Italy, and the mafia had great connections. So getting the mafia on the team meant you could get things done in Italy and in other parts. The mafia got under Lucky Luciano got into drug running, and the CIA was like, "Listen, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. We help you with the drug running thing. We get paid. That money helps us to fund our clandestine operations without the government oversight and scrutiny of the American taxpayer. So it's a win-win for everybody. We just need a bank with no public scrutiny. Gee. Who can we call? Oh, there's our buddies from the war, Montini and the rest, who had that spy network thing going on. We were all working together. We all had a great time. Maybe we can continue the good times rolling." And that is how they got involved with the Vatican Bank, laundering money through the Vatican Bank.
To write a book that requires a lot of research on the manipulation the U.S. government did of the Catholic Church after the war, and so I would probably have to go read up on that, because there's a lot of evidence, and there was a memo that was circulating the internet last week, talking from the State Department, talking about the manipulation of the conclave, 1958.
Exactly.
And, I've seen that. I've seen allegations that the U.S. government would just coincidentally, along with the Soviet Union, would just coincidentally coordinate their nuclear testing during interregnums, and they would do their nuclear testing during the key parts of the Second Vatican Council. Stuff that sounds a little out there.
Yeah, you got to read Operation Gladio
then,
then, because this is all about that. It's all about that. It's unfortunate. The author who wrote it starts out by saying he was raised Catholic. I got a feeling that his research led him out of the church. I don't know that. I don't know the guy that well.
I get the feeling that anytime someone says they were raised Catholic, they don't need to finish the sentence to let us know that they no longer practice the faith.
Yeah, and I think I bring it up to say this. I'm not going to abandon Holy Mother Church simply because there are wolves in sheep's clothing and bad men doing bad things in high-ranking circles. I'm Catholic because it's true, not because of anybody else. It's because of Jesus Christ. This is the church he founded. So we don't leave the church because of bad people. But man, is it disgusting to see these types of shenanigans going on. And the Church of Spies... I find a great book, actually. I would highly encourage reading The Church of Spies, especially if you've had friends or relatives or coworkers mention that Pius XII is Hitler's Pope. You read Church of Spies, you're going to have all of the details, the receipts. Church of Spies.
Is this Mark Reibling's book?
Correct.
Yeah,
great book.
I'm ordering these.
It's a great book. It's a page turner. It really is a page turner. I'm going to be telling the story of Joey Ox in New York next month. That's going to be based on. But Stauffenberg, the guy who planted the bomb in the Wolf Slayer, that guy was Catholic. He was sold out for the Catholic faith. He, in fact, that was a big part of the story. Is the Catholic elements in Germany wanted to get rid of Hitler. The Protestants who wanted to get rid of Hitler, they were more afraid than anything, and they wouldn't take action. Stauffenberg was not having it. He's like, my whole family's on the line here. We need men of action. So, like the Jesuits, the Jesuits were undercover, and they were trying to manipulate things clandestinely, and they were planning the government that would succeed the Hitler government. So the Jesuit priests were leading that. And then the spy network and the German generals were trying to plan the assassination attempts. And there were some like 15 attempts. And Hitler got out of every single one of them. I have to believe that God allowed that to happen. But I have to believe Hitler was possessed by a demon, maybe Satan himself. I have to believe he found some benefits from his diabolical possessions. And the book itself, provides the details and the receipts of Hitler's animosity towards Christianity in general, but the Pope in particular. In fact, once it's discovered, because the Germans kept records of all of their exchanges with Pius through the spy network, through Joey Ox, who flew back and forth to Rome all the time. They kept records, and the Vatican, they kept saying, please don't keep those records. Destroy them. They cannot discover any connection to Pius. The Germans kept them, and then the Nazis, the SS, found them. And when that information, the diaries were presented to Hitler, there is a very interesting section in the Church of Spies about Hitler going into a deep depression over the reality that Pius XII wanted him dead. Like, you got to read that section. It's so good. If you have any question about Hitler being possessed, I think you need to read that one. I think that's very, very telling. I would highly encourage everybody to check that book out. But the Catholic resistance in Germany was real, and it was heroic and courageous, and many people died trying to kill Hitler in the process. And they failed, of course, but at least they tried to do something. And and they called it Holy Germany. Holy Germany was their war cry. It's very, very fascinating. But we live in interesting times, to say the least.
Yeah.
Pius XII, very holy man. But, okay, one of the reasons why I brought this up to begin with today, and Dr. Stein, I'd like to get your comment on that, is how imperfect the human element to the church is. Pius XII had good intentions. So did a lot of people have good intentions. But they opened a can of worms in many ways. The spy network led to much bigger problems later down the road. So what was practical at the time led to something worse. You know, and that's the thing. I think a lot of what we're dealing with today, this time period under Pius plays a big part of that. And if Pius, towards the latter part of his pontificate, as he was getting sicker and sicker and losing less and less control, some things were getting out of control underneath him and on his watch. And I think we see the fruit of that today.
A lot of traditionalists, well, for instance, they have mixed feelings about Pius XII and generally discount most of the things he wrote in the last couple of years of his papacy, when his papacy was essentially being run by probably the same Jesuits who helped subvert the church later. I'm reminded, if you want another example of this, what was the first thing that happened? We're going to go real spicy here. There's a few days ago on Twitter was trending, repeal the 19th Amendment, which I laugh every time I see that because that's people trolling. And I'm not advocating repealing the 19th Amendment, don't worry. But I found it fascinating. If you know anything about the history of Prohibition, how we got Prohibition in the United States, it was the women were the ones who voted for Prohibition. They were the ones who did it. It was literally the first thing they used their vote for. And what happened when we got Prohibition? We got the mafia in the United States because organized crime existed, but it was nothing like it was by the time 1933 rolled around and Prohibition was repealed. And because we got the mafia, because through Prohibition, we got the FBI.
Yeah.
FBI, which for some reason people thought were the good guys until about the 1990s, when people started getting a little more realistic take on the evils of the FBI. And now most people will admit that their allegiance or their feelings towards the FBI has to do with their partisan affiliations these days. But that's kind of what we've got here. So Prohibition is actually when Americans allowed the sort of the Protestant culture to kind of go off the deep end here and say, let's ban alcohol instead of having the more Catholic take on alcohol, which is essentially, when it comes to material things, all things in moderation, really, until you start getting into narcotics, right? You start getting into like narcotics and other artificial things. That gets a little different, but alcohol is a moderation thing. Most people, unless of course you have a family history of problems with the substance, then don't use it, obviously. But once Prohibition was implemented, I think that's actually when this big daddy government problem in this country really took off, was Prohibition. Because they got rid of Prohibition, but you suddenly had the mechanisms for control in place. Because what did the FBI do after they beat the mafia? And this was something about, in grad school, my political theory professors always like to talk about. They're like, the FBI was put in place to defeat the mafia, and they basically did. But we still have the FBI. In the same way that NASA was created to put a man on the moon, and they did that, and we still have NASA. You will never get rid. Anytime you implement a new government program, it almost never goes away.
Yeah.
And
the government overreach is something serious. It's terrible. Yeah. And I don't see that going away anytime soon.
What was the CIA founded to do? What was that founded off of the OSS, right? So the OSS was essentially to defeat the Nazis. And then what happened? They
needed CIA, another job. They needed a mission. They needed a task. Sure. They needed to keep themselves busy afterwards. So they didn't even wait till the war ended. They were already in Vietnam training Ho Chi Minh up before the war was even over.
Decades before the war was started. I mean, Ho Chi Minh appealed to FDR. Okay, to give you an idea how long Ho Chi Minh had been at it, he had been appealing to the U.S. government for help for a long time. It would be interesting to find out, if we could find out someday, that the entire reason the Cold War happened wasn't because of the nuclear arms race, but it was because of the CIA manipulating things. If that were a revelation, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
The CIA have never been the good guys.
Yeah, if you read Operation Gladio, it'll give you, it's a gut punch, man. It's just so bad. Again, Lucky Luciano being one of the first mobsters to take drugs to a whole nother level. Drugs within the mob prior to that was minimal at best. They in fact they thought it was dishonorable, so they weren't into that.
Yeah, they were more into gambling.
Correct,
gambling
and booze
tobacco and alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. So Lucky Luciano sort of changed all that, and they started running heroin into Harlem for black musicians in particular, and then it took off from there. So, like, you know, think about the attack on the African American on black families. I mean, just
like,
they've been decimated. They've been decimated. That's a war on those families.
It is. And in the 1980s, John Kerry, a senator, made his name because he rightfully stood up to the CIA, and I think it was the FBI. It was some of the American intelligence agencies on the floor of Congress, and when he had been handed information showing that they were smuggling crack cocaine and selling it in the United States in the urban areas.
Yeah, Tom Cruise, who played Stauffenberg in Valkyrie, also played the drug runner for the CIA. And what was that film? Came out maybe 5-6 years ago. I forget the name of it, but he played the guy who got caught up with the CIA running drugs to South America and all of that, based on a true story.
I don't know.
I
don't know which one that
very
is.
Interesting times. You know that. So one of the reasons why I kind of brought up the whole CIA's Vatican spy connection thing was, so the Jesuit priests, Father Roche, Father Delp, and others, who would be hunted down and tortured and murdered after, their job was to provide spiritual direction to the conspirators and to help them come up with what would the government look like after Hitler. This is the strange thing. Why wouldn't they go back to the Kaiser? They had no design, no interest. So they were like, but it seems a little bit duplicitous. In one sense, they were like very reminiscent. They were romanticizing the good old days of Germany. They were talking about the sacred Germany, the holy Germany. You know, Hitler and his Nazi thugs are an affront to what is sacred and good about Germany. That was sort of like their mantra. And yet they had no designs whatsoever of bringing back the Kaiser. Like none. They were going to go. In fact, what they proposed would one day become the European Union.
Right. And I always find it funny when Catholics defend the European Union. Well, Catholics helped found it. I'm like, okay. Modernism has been a problem in the church since like the 1880s or something. It's been there for a long time.
Exactly.
The Jesuits who were probably, those Jesuits were probably modernists because it took hold in the Jesuit order first and foremost. Before anywhere else, it took hold in the Jesuits. And
you got to go back probably before they were suppressed. Before, yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're going to have to go back before they were suppressed.
I am convinced that World War I was a war more than anything else about destroying monarchies, and maybe they just took the opportunity at the end after World War II to finish the job. That way, the only monarchs left in Europe were basically symbolic monarchs, which they were fine with, as you see with Japan.
Right. Exactly. I see these things that are all connected. You know, the attack on monarchy, the attack on Christianity in particular, religion, I suppose, secondarily so. It's not that the Nazis weren't religious. They were just occultists. They wanted a paganism. They wanted to subvert Christianity so that they can unite people in a religion that they can control. So they chose Arianism because all of these people groups from in the European continent could go back to something more standard and common, and that was their pagan roots. So it gave them, and Goebbels, of course, believed in it all. So he got to run all of that propaganda. I don't think Hitler was as sold on all of that. He just wanted control, right? But I do believe he was possessed by the devil, and they were at war with the church. And he could have, like Bonhoeffer, by the way. Bonhoeffer was also in a part of the Vatican spy ring, which is how often you're going to hear that amongst Protestant circles. Go read Church of Spies. Bonhoeffer was brought to the Vatican. He was shown the crypt. He was shown down into what today, if you go down there, and I got to go down there when I was there in November, and stood 5 foot from the bones of St. Peter. Bonhoeffer was taken down there before all of that was completely excavated, and he was shown what the work was and shown like, hey, we're looking for St. Peter's bones. They're down here. We're on the hunt for them. And they were about the business of converting Bonhoeffer, actually. It's pretty fascinating. Bonhoeffer actually said that the Catholic Church was leading the way in the anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler movement. So there's a lot about Bonhoeffer that gets sort of left out because of the evangelical sort of spin on that. But when you look at all these dots that are connected, at the same time, the devil he can still win. Even if he's defeated in Nazi Germany, he can still win because he just simply picks up the pieces and keeps going. He can still pick up the spy ring and go, oh, well, you did, sure, yeah, you were successful there, but hold my beer, watch this. And after the war is almost worse in many ways because Stalin killed more people than Hitler did.
And the
Mao
American government brought in a whole lot of German scientists. And come on, no one ever asks this question. Do you think the U.S. government brought in German intelligence agents also?
Of course they did.
Any German spies? Yeah, it would make sense.
Of course they did. They went and swept them up and used them we got to the moon. The Saturn V rocket was Nazis. We took all we could.
How hard do you think it would have been for them to sell German spies after the war on spying for the U.S. government against the Soviet Union after World War II? Do you know anything about what happened? Do you know what happened in Germany at the hands of the Soviets after World War II? It was horrifying.
Right.
They did.
Yeah.
They were, all the wartime rape and pillaging you think of as being ancient history, they did that to the Germans after World War II.
Yes, exactly.
So
rape and pillage.
How hard would it be for, let's say you've got a military prison somewhere, a bunch of German spies, 1946, are sitting there, and steps into their cell, they're all in a meeting, some high-ranking White House official who offers them the deal that they can't turn down.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that was, I guess that was part of the scandal of Operation Gladio. When you read that book, it's like towards the end of the war, when they knew they were going to defeat Hitler and Nazism, it was all hands on deck to defeat communism. And they were willing to forego morals and ethics to accomplish that goal, right? So no price was too high to pay to defeat communism at that point. And there were many churchmen caught up in that. Many, many men in high-ranking positions within the Vatican and dioceses all over the world, I imagine, who were caught up in that same mission, defeat communism at all costs, and were willing to compromise their souls and the souls of others towards those ends. That's bad.
This is where I've heard people critique John Paul II on that too.
Saying George Weigel.
Was it a good? There are people who are saying, was it a good idea in hindsight for John Paul II to allow the church to become that cozy with the U.S. government to defeat communism? Because what was the result of that? How much has money, American government money, through its grant programs to Catholic charities, corrupted the church? Because Catholic charities are overseen by the local bishop. Catholic charities, you take a little cut and give it to the diocese, which means it goes to the bishop. Well, any money that goes to the diocese, a little cut of that goes to the Vatican. And you start to see how this works. So how much problem has this caused people? But you can't say that because, you can't critique anybody, any of the post-conciliar popes except maybe Paul VI and maybe Pope Francis. Those are the only ones you're really allowed to critique.
So well, I tell you what, I got a critique. I got a critique right now for Don Franco hanging out with us over on Facebook. Don Franco says, Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, the most beautifully shot movie ever made. That's not even close to possible, Don Franco. I don't even know how you're coming to that conclusion. Have you not seen Lawrence of Arabia? How can you say Barry Lyndon is better than Lawrence of Arabia?
Barry Lyndon's gorgeous. It's right up there. All the natural lighting, the composition.
Now
it's pretty gorgeous.
See what you've done, amazing. Don? You've corrupted my producer. Jake, do me a favor. After the show, have yourself
It's not
publicly.
Kubrick's best fictional film, though. The best one is that little one he made in the 60s, the late 60s, sci-fi one, the one about the moon.
2001, right?
Yes, of course, that's what I was
Space
referring to.
Odyssey?
Of course.
Space
that's what
Oh, you're killing me. Hey, Dr. Stein, thanks again. God bless you all. See you guys right back here tomorrow morning.
God bless.